Here we go. Well, everyone, welcome from all around the world. We're just going to let people trickle in. The numbers are already building up quickly. You can see the number of participants down below. But I am going to kick off because you're lovely people. I want to say hello to Bill and Claudia. How are you doing in New Zealand, Bill, Claudia?
Well, today, Ray, it's raining outside, so it's actually quite nice to be inside out of that and have an excuse to sit down. So
it's very British weather at the moment, which we don't really want.
Well, Bill, you're sporting your pink shorts there, though, aren't you? Can you give us some?
Yeah, I've tried a little bit festive.
Just to show off to us, yeah, shorts.
Yeah, it is officially summer here. So
it's a Kiwi summer, 4 seasons in one day. And Rafa and Nuria, how are you doing? How's it going in Spain?
It's quite okay. The weather is nice these days. It's sunshine all the time, so we're not too bad.
Perfect. Oh, lovely. And then welcome, Oscar. How are you doing, my friend? You're in Porto, did you say?
Hello, Ray. Yes, I'm in Porto. I just put the kids to sleep, so hopefully they are not going to show up, but if it happens, I taught them to wave and smile.
Yeah, that's perfect. It's a Christmas gathering, this one. So if kids run through crying, fighting, throwing food, it's totally acceptable. No problem at all. And welcome to everyone who's joined us now through Zoom or whether you're watching on Facebook. And this is a Christmas get together from around the world to explore the different types of food that everyone enjoys over Christmas. And we're going to match it with the wines which you will have received in your pack in the post. So before I crack on, you're probably familiar with this by now. Well, what about 18 months since Zoom World that we've all been put into it, but you see the chat section down below there. Chat, let us know where you are. That's just to sort of check in with your fellow angels and say what you're drinking, where you're based. Well, hopefully you're drinking these wines, and but feel free to participate and get involved. And then also over on the other side, you've got the Q&A, and that's where you could put questions to any of our 5 winemakers, and we'll take those questions occasionally as we go through, and then some more again at the end. So please get involved, and that's what it's about. So it's Tuesday night, it's Christmas season, so I need a glass of wine. So we're going to kick off with your wine first, guys, the Theodore Sauvignon Blanc. So I'm just going to demonstrate for everyone, and please don't think this the wrong way in a talking down fashion, but if I may just simply demonstrate how to open these packs so that you don't have, a bloodbath all over your carpet. So you remove the capsule first, and then you've got this inner bag here, and then you just give it a wee snip like that. Less is more, really, in terms of the snip, and then into a glass sideways and boom, and then you just go nuts, fill it up. Well, or you can just do a half glass. You can put a peg or something like that over this bag, and you can stick it back in the fridge, and it's good for a day or two if you're drinking alone. So bear in mind, we've got 6 packs, each have 100 mils, so you'll be totally sloshed if you've drunk them all yourself. And I encourage you to drink responsibly. There we go. That's the disclaimer out of the way. Okay, so Bill and Claudia, great to see you guys. And can you tell us, just first of all, we should just kick off as we taste this wine. And for the benefit of the other winemakers, Bill and Claudia, who don't have the wines with them, everyone else watching does have the wines. Can you sort of describe this New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc and how it is a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc like no other?
Sure, we can. This is the actual wine that it looks like in the bottle, if you'd like to see it.
We're not actually going to drink it. It's like 9 in the morning. It's a bit early for us.
When we started with Naked, just nearly a little bit over 10 years ago, it sort of came about as a bit of an idea that we thought we might try. It involved breaking away from what people normally do with Sauvignon, and that's fermented in big stainless steel tanks. And we thought that maybe if we took a step back and a little bit more old-fashioned and fermented it in older barrels with wild yeast, it might, I guess, give a wine with a little bit more layers of flavour, a bit more complexity, a little bit more stuff going on in it than your average Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc. I think we had to be very careful at the time to choose exactly the right grapes. And we've got a really good vineyard that we use for this one. It's older vines, slightly lower yielding. So you still get that amazing, Marlborough intensity of flavour, but then you've got this other stuff going on in the background that I don't know, it gives a wine with a few extra dimensions.
Yeah.
So vineyard, we've been taking the same fruit since 2013 with this wine. So having that like consistent, and you know, season to season things are a bit different. We can't always make it every year depending on the weather. But you get that real consistency of style through it. And the winemaking's changed a little bit over time.
Yeah, we've tweaked it this way and that depending on what angels tell us they like. But I think the important thing is, although it is fermented in oak barrels, we try to keep the number of new oak barrels very small, just so that you actually, when you taste it, you're not tasting a big whiff of oak. You're tasting Sauvignon Blanc, but there's a little bit of stuff going on in the background that says, oh, I might come and have another look at that.
And so how does that then translate? And I can have a go at sharing my thoughts on it, but how do you think that translates into the glass? So everyone is tasting this at home. They know New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc and they love your wines. They're usually crisp and racy. Sylvia, a bit more sort of aromatic and fruit profile dialed up. And but this, from my perspective, is the textural qualities of this wine. It's sort of
Indeed, yeah.
coats rather than going straight down the line. It has this sort of mouth coating roundness, which is why I thought we might, and it's a little bit the same as yours, Rafa and Nuria, with the benefit. It has more, it is as a suitability to food, and especially sort of like, you know, roast meats or so on. So it sort of stands up. So would you add anything else? Yeah.
It's much better. Like often the traditionally made Sauvignons sort of hang off that acid line, and that can make it a bit tricky with food. I like some things are amazing, but then some things are like, whereas I think this is a much more, you can,
a more food-friendly version of Sauvignon. I think, from
definitely.
We're maturing in barrels, and we give it probably 9-12 months in the barrels. And if I can get geeky, I'm allowed to get a little bit geeky, Ray. Is that okay?
Go.
We've got all the dead yeast cells in the barrels after the fermentation, and they're just like a murky layer on the bottom. But
geeky and dark.
Yeah, as time goes on, they break open, and the contents of the yeast cell actually come out into the wine, and that changes the way the wine feels in the mouth, and that's where that creamy mouth feeling thing that you're talking about comes from.
Yeast guts.
Yeah.
Do you see the same thing, Rafa and Nuria, with benefit? Is that on lees? Do you do batonnage with that wine for mouthfeel?
We do. We don't use a great deal of batonnage just because Garnacha Blanca is quite a full-bodied wine anyway. So we need to find the balance between that full-bodied character and also avoiding too much of a yeasty quality, which can come about through excessive use of batonnage. So we have to find that balance, but certainly a little bit, about 2 or 3 months, is definitely beneficial for benefit. And I was going to ask Bill and Claudia, did you say the wine was made from spontaneous fermentation?
Yeah, a lot. I think it's probably about 40 or 50% is spontaneous fermentation, and the other 40 or 50% is done with, I'm going to get geeky on everybody again, but it's done with non-traditional wine yeast, so not Saccharomyces. It's other stuff from a packet, but not Saccharomyces. So again, that helps add to that mouthfeel character.
We decided
we split
a couple of. Sorry.
Oh no! So I was just going to say we split it from a risk point of view, because going entirely wild can go really well, or really bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we are not big experimentation in spontaneous fermentation, but 2 years ago we decided do everything spontaneous in the winery, and at the moment we're lucky; it's working really well.
Yeah.
And we are very happy with that.
I think it really helps move away from the stereotypical wine, so you get a little bit of that more spontaneous quality to it, and it just helps you achieve something unexpected, which
exactly
you can surprise people more easily, I think.
Yeah.
That's lovely, and it adds a bit of character, personality that you can't add from a packet. So that's a nice way of putting it together. What about food then, guys? Bill and Claudia, in terms of you've got Scottish heritage. Claudia, I think you have something in the UK as well. But so what would you sort of pair with, if you understand the British traditional Christmas dinner? And then it'd be good to hear what you guys are eating as well on Christmas Day down under New Zealand.
Well, it's actually Bill's half Scottish, and we were talking this morning, his Christmases are much more traditional when we're at home. Bill's actually from Australia, so from a farm in rural Victoria. So when we go home there, it's much more traditional turkey, smoked salmon starters on bread, that sort of thing. And then for us, it sort of depends. I sort of go between going full Delia for Christmas or full Ottolenghi. So this year we're Ottolenghiing. So I'm attempting to, my entire family are coming down to visit, and they've all been in lockdown in Auckland for the last 4 months. So they are dying to get out. Yeah. So I'm actually serving them lentils for Christmas, which might not go down very well.
They'll be dying to go back and lockdown, extend the lockdown. No, so no, Ottolenghi, absolutely beautiful food. So just if you can share with Angels, the spice up, are you going to go with Sauvignon Blanc, Sylvia, or Theodore, or Pinot Noir? And what kind of food will you serve? Vegetarian or not?
If my family are there, we always have to have Sauvignon Blanc on the table, and preferably Sylvia. We send vast amounts of Sylvia north to them.
But, it's always part of Christmas. And I think not necessarily for you guys so much, but the Sylvia at this time of year, when it's sunny and you've got late evenings and it's usually quite warm, it's a perfect wine for this time of year.
Yeah.
But the Theodore, which is probably more suited to a UK Christmas, I would have said, just because it is a bit more of a more interesting wine, not so much the refreshing style, quite so much.
I really like the Theodore with those sort of, those gutsy, punchy Ottolenghi salads. I think it stands up really well with that, like lots of fresh herbs and that sort of bit Middle Easty spice thing. I think it does really well with that. And that's sort of what we're going for with Christmas this year.
Lovely. Well, it's delicious, and I can tell the appreciation in the chat. Many people are already drinking the wine and they're loving it. So, and I'm loving it. So, well, what we will do is we'll go to the second wine now, and then we can come back for your Pinot Noir, guys. So the second wine is from Rafa Nuria, and this is Benefit. So this is how I'm opening my bottle. But yeah, tell us about it there, Rafa, if you don't mind.
Yeah, Benefit is a 100% Garnacha Blanca. Garnacha Blanca is the indigenous variety in Terra Alta. Almost 90% of the Garnacha in Catalonia is planted there, and 40% of the Garnacha all over the world. And it was planted in the 18th century. So basically, we make all the whites with Garnacha Blanca. And Benefit is from a vine's average 40 years old, because we have one which is 80 and another one which is 25. And the soils are calcareous and clay.
Okay. And what does that give then to the character? So, share with us what we might be tasting, and perhaps it'd be good to understand how the background and the environment contributes to those flavors.
So Garnacha Blanca is a very versatile grape variety. It can make a whole range of styles of wine, from really fresh and simple to kind of more complex, but still naked in terms of no oak influence, to oak age-worthy wines, as well as orange wines and sweet wines. For the Benefit, as we were talking about earlier, we do spontaneous fermentation, which is really difficult because there's no skin contact with this wines. So with Garnacha Blanca, you often get a lot of these kind of tannins or bitterness in the wines. We really don't want this in this wine. So there's no skin contact, which makes spontaneous fermentation really challenging and lasts a long time. But once you get it, you have a kind of, we hope you have a purer, fresher style of wine, which is quite aromatic. It doesn't have that oxidative quality that you can sometimes find in Garnacha Blanca.
Yeah.
And then on the palate, hopefully we're getting a kind of luscious purity to it that makes it very food friendly. If we had too much bitterness or tannins, then the wine gets heavy and more difficult to pair with food. I think this wine lends itself well to quite subtle dishes, maybe smoked salmon. I'm thinking smoked salmon at the beginning of the Christmas lunch.
That's a typical British.
Very British, as you can probably tell. I am British. Nuri's going to tell us what it would pair with in our Catalan lunch over Christmas.
Yeah, well, in the Catalan lunch we do appetizers, which normally are seafood, prawns, mussels, and oysters, no? Which is, it goes really well with the Benefit, because the Benefit, it has this salinity at the end, which pair really well with the seafood. And then a typical dish is Sopa De Gallet. This is a typical soup with gallet is difficult to translate, but
It's like
snail form of
it's like pasta. It's pasta basically.
very simple.
Yeah.
And
I'm going to keep things simple.
and normally it's full of meat. The pasta is full of meat.
Okay.
which
Very
is,
good. So it's wrapped. The
so
meat.
you can-
Yeah.
You could start with the benefit with the appetizers and continues with the soup with the same wine.
How many courses do you have typically on Christmas Day?
Normally 3: appetizer, soup, and then a roast chicken, or maybe roast lamb.
Is everyone in Spain eating roast lamb on the same
Yeah.
day? It's pretty
You
popular.
don't want to be a lamb at this time of year in the UK.
No, and our consideration. And there are obviously vegetarian. Do you have many vegetarians nearby that you know in your area?
Not really.
Yes.
Say yes.
It's not allowed. Not allowed.
This is a vegan wine, but we only do that for exports. I mean, it's completely wasted space in Spain.
Well, no, it's growing, but still a few people only.
Yeah, very good. Well, I think this wine, in comparison to the Theodore, which had sort of like had pushed up aromatics as well, the Theodore, and here we sort of it goes a little maybe deeper, longer. It's not a comparison in terms of qualities, but it's more stylistically. And I can sort of also see this on the Christmas table with whether it's roast white meat or of a sort, but always is important to remember is the sort of the condiments that go around the meat, whether it's chicken or beef or vegetarian, but it is the strength of the flavors, the sage and the stuffing and the let's say, well, pigs in blankets, which is where you put bacon over sausages and all sorts of things like that, cranberry sauce, all the things that sort of carry off the plate. That's in a sense what you're looking to keep up with. Complement would be a nice way of saying it, but sometimes those flavors can take over. And this wine, beautiful texture, rich, lush, long, and it's drinking beautifully now. Is this a wine that you would keep for a long time? Not in these tasting packs, they last about 3 or 4 weeks, but in a bottle, which do you keep this white a little longer? Is it possible?
I think, we don't want to go crazy in terms of aging the wine. I would say maximum 4 years, maybe 5 years, and see some improvement over 2 or 3 years.
And what happens to the flavor? How does it change from currant to what?
I think just because Garnacha, we would describe it in geeky terms as phenolic. So even though we do as much as possible to avoid those tannins and bitterness getting into the wine, there's always a little bit, and that comes across as that salty quality in the wine, which is very attractive in the first 2 or 3 years. But over time, the wine can get a little bit too heavy. If you give it long enough, it can become almost an orange wine, which becomes really interesting in its own right. But I think in terms of sort of fine white wine, 4 or 5 years is about what we would expect to age it for.
Lovely. Yep. And Oscar, can I ask you then, in terms of the type of food and the wines? I mean, you're here with your fortified, your port, your Tawny, and your LBV tonight, but you obviously have delicious whites, and maybe we have a new wine coming for you, which we could let slip later. But you have your red wine. So what do you typically eat on Christmas Day? Whether that's the 24th, do you celebrate on the 24th?
Yeah, the evening of the 24th. We typically have codfish. Dried codfish, which the Portuguese have been fishing in Norway for centuries, and drying in the sunshine and the beaches of Portugal, and then salted to preserve it for several weeks. So we boil the codfish with cabbage and also potatoes, and a lot of olive oil on the top. Usually, and then this is very strange, but usually everyone is going to make more food, extra food to have a leftover for the next day, for lunch next day. So it's typical then to mix all the cod with the cabbage and the potatoes, and that's what's going to have on the next day on the 25th for lunch.
Very good. So it's intended leftovers.
Yeah, intended leftovers. And then we also have the roasted lamb, which is also very typical in Portugal, a little bit all over. And you can have a third dish, which is octopus rice.
Oh,
So it's very intense, the Christmas evening in Portugal. especially in the countryside where, you know, the temperatures are lower and people want more robust and intense dishes. Typically we started a white wine and then we have a couple of reds, more full-bodied reds, you know, already with some aging in bottle, but definitely something that can handle that roasted lamb.
Awesome. And so, but do you, the wines you match with it, you have your white wines, your Oscar's White, or does that go with the codfish particularly? And at what point you break out the port?
Yeah, so we have the port after the meal. Once you are done with the main dishes, we start with Oscar's White. My sister also likes to bring her white wine as it's a bit more complex, more full-bodied. Claudius, it ages in oak, so it gets a bit more of that you know, winter character that goes well with more intense fish dishes. And once you are done with the roasted lamb, we go for the ports. We usually have a very fat, intense Serra cheese, which goes great with a full-bodied rubies such as the LBV or a vintage port. And then when it's late and, you know, Santa is about to arrive, we move into the tonies and we just have little sips of the tonies on its own.
Yeah,
so it's a long evening.
Yeah, long evening and a big head the next morning, but ideally you pick up again. No, lovely. And actually, you know, just to ask on it, you know, Oscar, where you are, northwest of the Iberian Peninsula, let's call it, you know, in Porto.
In the Douro Valley.
In the Douro base, which would be up river about 3 hours. But, you know, just that seafront, I think you and I as Celts, you know, we share some heritage in that, because we are seafaring, and those are, you know, even Northwest Spain, Basque, Galician, we're the same as, you know, Scots, Irish, Welsh. We're the same people. So I'll try your salty cod, and you try my, well, I don't know what I'm having.
What are you gonna have?
Well, we go on Christmas Eve. We try and have some oysters if we're in town in Dublin. Hopefully going to Dublin this year, and smoked salmon always. And then on the day, my grandaunt makes incredible prawn, a starter of prawns with mango and lime, and I can't even explain what else goes on in there, but it's just sensational. So that's great. And then all a typical, the rest is quite traditional, turkey and so on. But yeah, there's often quite too many bottles on the table, which is sort of gets a bit noisy. But then you know, you can sort of try too hard, and sometimes you just go, just pick one bottle, leave it on the table, and stop talking about it. You know, so I sometimes need to turn down the wine amp on Christmas Day.
And just let it flow.
Yeah, exactly. So moving on, why don't we? Sorry, Claudia.
Oh, I was just wondering, do you eat salt cod often, or is it just at Christmas?
No, we do, Claudia. We eat cod. I mean, in a normal family, have cod maybe once a week, in 1,000 different ways. You know, grilled in the oven, or just boiled, or I mean, there are many different fried. There's many different ways of making the cod, but always dry and salted. We never have it fresh.
Huh.
Yeah,
Okay.
that there is a reason for that, because in Catalonia it's the same, because in the countryside where we live far away from the sea, the only fish that arrived to the countryside was cod, the salty cod. It was the same in my town.
For preservation. Yeah, makes sense. Great. Okay, shall we move on to reds, which will be your Pinot Noir, guys? So this is Small Smalls wine number 3. And I'm just going to fetch mine from down here. And while I do, I have to just say a happy birthday. We have an archangel, Abby. It's her birthday today. I'm sure she would be totally mortified if we all said happy birthday together, but maybe just a quick happy birthday to Abby, and I hope you're enjoying yourself, drinking, tasting.
Happy birthday, Abby.
Hey.
Super. So over to you guys, back to New Zealand. Tell us about this beautiful Pinot Noir. Look at that absolutely gorgeous color. Fantastic.
Well, I just want to say we're like 3 from 3 because we're having lamb for Christmas as well. So
Wow.
There will be no furry animals left on the planet on the 26th. Okay.
I think we've got a few to spare down here, Ray. It's okay.
Oh, it's true. It is true.
having hogget, to be honest.
Oh, you are having hogget.
We've got a good butcher who knows where to get good stuff, and
it's hogget season.
And it's hogget here. It's a little bit older and a bit more flavour, but it's always tasty.
Yeah.
Well, just saying, pick up that, and I should know that is that a older lamb, a hogget?
Yeah, so it's in its second year rather than its first year, or it's
Bill's from a sheep farm.
I'm from a sheep farm originally, so yeah. So it's still, I mean, it's not much more than a lamb, but it's just a bit more.
And it's bigger too, which is useful.
And what how does the flavour change? It's apologies to all vegetarians, but this is just
exactly. It just becomes not quite so delicate, a bit more robust, I think. Just a bit more flavour.
Yeah. But it doesn't like fall over into that, when you get too old. Well, what do you call it after hogget?
Is it two-tooth?
Yeah. It's not like too like sheepy, but just it's a bit more. Sometimes your really young lamb can be a bit bland. And when I want to eat lamb, I want to eat like lamb. So that's sort of hogget. Yeah. So we'll get the leg butterflied out and marinate it for a day or two in like a yogurty thing. And then I don't think we're going to be able to barbecue it this year because I think the ham's going to be on the barbecue.
No, well, actually, I've thought about that.
Oh.
We haven't talked about it ourselves, but I will get up very early. We've got a charcoal barbecue at the back, and so I'll barbecue our Christmas ham first. That takes sort of probably 4 hours because it's massive. And then if I get things going the right way, then I should be able to take the ham off and put the butterflied leg of lamb. That won't take so long. And by the time the ham is ready to go and has cooled, then we can take the lamb off and they will be both ready to hit the table.
That's excellent. Oh, good. Okay.
We're on pictures, please post them on your wall. And all the angels, if you're not following any of these winemakers already, make sure you do. And guys, it'd be great if you did share your Christmas meals, if that's suitable with you. But definitely we want to see lamb versus ham and who wins that one. Yeah, nice one. So tell us about the Pinot, if you would.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
So the Pinot, yes, which is Pinot Noir, which is about the only red grape that ripens reliably in Marlborough, just because we're a bit cooler than most of the other viticultural regions in the world. But I think that the trade-off between not being able to ripen other red varieties is that Pinot Noir, which doesn't always do well, does really quite well here. The one that I think you're drinking is the 2020, which if you cast your mind back to the start of 2020, was peaked just as COVID was starting to go down. It was crazy, crazy times for us because we were working with guys who were doing hand picking in the vineyard. We didn't know anything much about social distancing or anything like that. It's quite stressful just making sure that we could actually get the grapes in and keep everybody safe when we didn't really know the rules of COVID.
Yeah.
But fortunately, we did get it all in, and it
was quite an early season, and it was also it was really dry. Sort of after December, it was just dry the whole way through. So no disease pressure. It was beautifully warm, but not too hot. And it was just a really great Pinot expression.
Great season for Pinot.
Yeah.
So I think what we like about that particular wine, especially the 2020, is it shows this sort of balance between not being not too big and gutsy, but not too light either. It's just right down that middle of easy to drink, but got stuff going on. For our Christmas especially, where you're having a glass of red in the middle of the day and you don't want something too heavy, it's perfect for that sort of situation.
Sometimes we do Australian Shiraz as well and things like that. Yeah. Sometimes it can get a bit much.
Yeah.
Good with the ham, not so good with the lamb, the Aussie Shiraz, but the Pinot, I bet would be beautiful with the lamb. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was going to say, it's just as a red, it's a good red for all sorts of situations. I think it's not too big for some things, and it won't swamp things, but it goes with lots of others.
And I was just going to say, for those that are already massively enthused by the Pinot and the Theodore, and they're click happy and they're trying to add it to their basket, we do have it in stock. It was held out of stock just so that we could fulfill these tasting packs. And so tomorrow, I believe, it'll be back on the website. So if you're enjoying it and you wanted to add one to basket, it's not a hard sell. It's just, it does exist. It's in the UK. It will be with you. But it will go back live tomorrow. That and the other thing I wrote down, which I can't remember now, Listel as well, which we're going to come on to from the guys, the next wine. So yeah, apologies if you can't find it on the website now, but you will find it there tomorrow. What about Pinot Noir, where you guys are, Rafa and Nuria? I mean, you're Mediterranean, too hot. Is Garnacha, your red Garnacha, your equivalent?
Pinot, I mean, I'm sure Bill and Claudia would agree, is a cool climate variety.
Absolutely.
We are Mediterranean. We have a lot of sun. We don't have much rain. So we're definitely closer to the Rhone, the south of France, the Mediterranean coast. So Garnacha or Grenache, Syrah, and then some other more local indigenous varieties like Carignan.
And the Garnacha Peluda, which is a hairy Garnacha, which is less color, more similar in terms of structure like the Pinot Noir. And it goes really well in Terralta also.
But we're always going to have quite a lot of ripeness. You can mitigate that a little bit with altitude and breezes, which we do have in Terralta, and the cooler soil type like chalky rock and things like that, or sandy clay. But we're never going to get a really cool climate style wine. That's not possible where we are. So
for us, the balance is the two winds, one coming from the north, which is really dry and help us to protect from the disease. And then we have the Garbic coming from the seaside. And this is the wind that gives us more acidity and fresh to the wines.
Yeah, and isn't that just it? It's just that nature gives us, and geography and topography gives us all the world of wine, which is, honestly speaking, what got me hooked on wine in the beginning when I did a wine course in Dublin in 2004 or something like that. Oh, not forced into it, but sort of encouraged along to go and sit in this wine course. And I was like, well, I don't know anything about wine. And actually it was level 3, which is like advanced, quite far along. So I was sort of dropped in at the deep end. And I just remember by the third class going, this is incredible. This is geography, climate, and booze. You know, it's all these things. And why you mentioned Aussie Shiraz, and I love Rhone Syrah from the Rhone, the same grape Shiraz. And I remember tasting that and going, God, that's delicious. The peppery character, the bacon character. And then you taste an Australian Shiraz from Barossa or somewhere, and you go, that's the same grape, but they're so different. They're not so different, but they are different. And the reasons are X, Y, Z, all the climate. And you're talking about the winds that influence that, the soil, as you said, Rafa, and the proximity to the sea and all that. And it's just, I don't know, it's farming, and it's pure nature. And that's why each and every one of you guys have your highs and lows with what the gods and throw at you each year. And for me, that is on top of all, the appreciation and talking about cherries and so forth, just to really appreciate everything coming from the land, everything dependable on, what's going to happen each year. And also, I guess, a bit of human intervention in terms of how people clocked that over the years, hundreds of years of going, Pinot Noir still isn't growing for me here in Spain. And they go, okay, bugger it, let's go with Garnacha. And, but it's just that understanding and progression of the culture of wine.
For me, that's a good point, because if our ancestors decided to plant Garnacha in Terralta and other varieties in other places, was for some reason because they had a big capacity of observation, observation of the nature that we lost the last years, And I think just observing what our ancestors did in the soil and is invented, we don't need to invent anything.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think the whole concept of terroir includes culture and tradition, as well as geography, topography, and climate. Yeah. And I think we have to keep our traditions and the cultural practices in mind when making wines. I think it's a shame just to forget it all. We need to pay homage in a way.
And carry it, bring it from the vineyard on, and deliver it through to bottle in the, that's sort of the role a winemaker can do, is to sort of like deliver the vineyard expression straight through to bottle without messing it up, basically, and without intervening so much, so that you continue the expression. Sounds very romantic, but actually it is romantic. Wine is an art and a science.
It's more difficult than it sounds.
Oh yeah.
Because there's so many things that can go wrong and turn what is a beautiful natural thing, like a fruit, like a berry, into something horrible. So you need to just try and keep it as clean and as faultless as possible, and that's not as easy as it might appear at first sight.
No, noted. And Oscar, where you are,
I just thought winemakers did nothing. No.
Yeah, no.
I'm a bit of, so I only do the grape side of things.
You're flying the flag for the viticulturists, the people out in the vineyard taking care of the vines. Hugely important. And for you, we thank you. We raise a glass. But Oscar, just a quick note where you are in the Douro, inland, upriver, and pretty hot in the summer. But what kind of challenges do you face, and how do you manage those?
Well, we are pretty much in the edge of the of temperature during summertime for what the vine can handle in terms of heat. We have many days above 35 degrees. And in terms of rainfall, we are about 350 millimeters, which is very low. Irrigation is allowed, but it's may represent 5% of the total production. So it's still very, very small. So the vine has to prepare for very high temperatures in summer and very low level of humidity in the soil. So it produces less grapes with more concentration of flavors, which is great for quality. But on a cost perspective, it's expensive. And we have been experiencing that since, labor is getting more and more scarce and expensive. So that's our challenge. It's probably how can we handle the lack of water in terms of rainfall and the usually very high temperatures that we experience in summertime.
Yeah. And just lastly, just while we have that bonnet open, we'll go back to tasting this wine, but just Oscar, one last question on that. How are you going to manage that if temperatures continue to increase?
There are three things that we are trying to change to make it just possible and sustainable. One is to go back to varieties that were planted by our ancestors and can handle better the heat, the high temperatures, and also the water stress. And we have some obscure grape varieties that we can bring back and replant them. Also using varieties that are less disease sensitive. Mm-hmm. And we have a few of them, Tinta Miúda, Rufete, Tinta Barroca, and we have planting more of that. So trying to go into a more sustainable way of using less spray into the vineyard. And the third one, which it's relatively easy due to the landscape in the Douro, it's to go higher in altitude. Mm-hmm. Instead of locating our vineyards low by the river, the Douro River, at 100 to 200 meters above sea level, we can go up to 600-700 meters, and that's where you get the best white grapes to make the white wines, and where more and more reds are going to be planted to keep them balanced. Mm.
So it's, as we were just saying a moment ago, I was perhaps quite romantically, just how we sort of learn to live with and listen to and observe nature. At some point you need to keep up with nature, and there's a race on as well to try and stay ahead of it in terms of winemaking. So again, as you said, Nuria, it's about observing. The observation we're doing today is perhaps different to the observation of our ancestors, but it's still, it's nature. Yeah. Okay, we're going to move on to the fourth wine, but I think I remember people's appreciation of a tasting note. So I'll have a go, because you guys in New Zealand are not tasting because it's 9 in the morning or 9:30. So I'll have a shot. So with this Pinot Noir from you guys, I think it is more Morello cherry, so red to dark cherry character, a little bit of clove spice, not too much. It's really, it's very subtle in a wine, but it's very satisfying. So I think in terms of how it would be enjoyed over Christmas, you mentioned some of the dishes, but also it's the sort of, am I allowed to say this, but the sort of daytime drinking wine, you know, the one where you're just sort of knocking about the house and picking up rubbish and stuff. It's a nice glass to have on the side, or someone comes over, you know, it's not too big, not weighty, and it's very, very satisfying for its subtlety. So those are the tasting characters I would give to this wine. Why don't we go on to a slightly bigger, richer wine from Rafa and Nuria. I'm just going to open mine, but would you mind introducing it there again, guys, while I take the time to open mine? So this is wine number 4.
L'Estel is a blend. It's a blend of 60% Garnacha, 20 Carignan, and 20 Syrah. Obviously, Garnacha and Carignan are indigenous varieties, but the Syrah is originally from France, planted in Terra Alta around 40 years ago. And I think from the foraneous varieties is the best capacity of adaptation to our climate and soils. But I think the Syrah must be planted in the high altitude possible, which we did, no?
For freshness.
Yeah. It's around 450 meters above sea level.
Okay.
So here the kind of aim with this wine is to try and achieve a traditional blend. So today, it's sort of the wine world and markets always look for single varietal wines. It's easy to talk about, like 100% Garnacha or 100% Syrah, but there's still a place for blends, I think. And you get some of that lovely sort of lush fruit quality from the Garnacha. You get that nice acidity and herbaceousness from the Carignan, and the Syrah brings structure and weight to the wine. So you get all of those components, and it adds complexity. So I still think there's an argument for making blended wines, and we're just trying to make a kind of a blend, but in the Herencia Artes style, which is all about freshness and minerality. So it's about getting that balance right between those three grape varieties, and then once fermentation is complete, we age the wines in different types of vessels. So some of the wines aged in concrete tanks, some of the wine is aged in large Austrian oak foudres, and some in smaller barrels, French oak. And then we blend after about a year of oak aging. And just
can I ask a question at that point? Just on a high level, because the geekometer, the geek police called in earlier when we went a bit far, but just in general, between concrete, large oak vessel and small oak vessel, what is the objective of using each of those three? And how might we see it in this wine?
Well, definitely the concrete tanks, for instance, all three vessels allow a degree of interchange with oxygen. And the idea is to achieve complexity in the wines. But certain grape varieties require more or less interference, if you like, from the vessel. So the concrete is the most neutral. So you have some oxygenation, but nothing else. Then the larger oak foudres, so the 5,000 liter Austrian oak foudres, the ratio of wine to barrel is much smaller. So I think that's right, smaller. Yeah.
Smaller.
So you have, again, less of an impact of the oak on the wine. And of course, with the smaller barrels, there's a much larger impact from the oak because there's obviously more wine in contact with oak. So you're going to get some of that toastiness from the wine, which can be beneficial, particularly for grape varieties that are not as naturally sweet and have a little bit more tannins in them. They work well with the sweeter tannins that can come from an oak barrel.
And so
for example, the Austrian oak is the toast is very gentle, so it's very natural oak. And for varieties like the Garnacha Peluda, which is very delicate, it's perfect because there is no interference of the oak flavors.
And the end product, I think what people are tasting here, and I don't know if you guys got it, you're allowed to drink. It's 9 p.m., nearly 10 p.m.
Oh yeah, we're drinking, yeah.
I hope so. So the flavors then which have been transported from the varieties you mentioned, and also this bit of oak, can you just give some nice, some descriptors, some words that people might be able to relate to as they taste this wine? Fruit.
Yeah, I mean, the Garnacha from Terra Alta, from our part of the world, normally has a very red fruit profile rather than the darker red, black fruits that you get from other parts of Spain. So you get red cherry, raspberry. You sometimes get a little bit of rhubarb in the wine, which is almost like a Pinot-like quality sometimes. Then you get the violets from the Syrah, which comes across really nice in that floral capacity. And the Carignan has this more mineral, stony, kind of earthy quality to it. And definitely on the palate, it gives it a big hit of acidity as well, which helps keep it fresh.
Lovely. And people could, if, like I said, this will be back on the site tomorrow, but it's drinking really well at the moment. And as I noticed someone mentioning, it's quite a contrast to the Pinot Noir. And, not by coincidence, but it is just good to show two styles of reds, the lighter, fresher, pure style. And then this wine definitely has freshness, but there's a bit more warmth and generosity, texture as well in it as well. So lovely. Again, continue to let us know what you're drinking.
I think Bill was going to ask something.
Oh, beg your pardon.
I was going to ask Raphael and Nuria, is what you guys call Garnacha, is that what would be called in France Grenache?
Yes,
or is it a different product?
It is.
Yeah.
But in Terra Alta, our appellation, we have two red garnachas. One which is the same that in France, and the other one that I talked before, which is the Garnacha Peluda, which is a bigger berry and is a lighter color and is more has a nicer acidity, and it's very elegant. So it's completely different. The fruit never is completely black; it's red rather than black.
Yeah.
Nuria, do you want to translate the meaning of peluda?
Peluda means hairy, because in the leaves it has this kind of hair.
Like a peach.
Like a
peach.
Oh, here.
Yeah. Hair. It was a mutation. It was a mutation from the garnacha, the common garnacha, the French garnacha, to better adaptation to the hot weather in the Mediterranean. So it's really good plant for thinking in climate change, no? Because it has big capacity to resist to the dry weather.
We always blend in a little bit of Garnacha Peluda, even if we don't put it on the label, just because the percentages change for each wine, but it always adds a touch of freshness. So it's a great blending component, as well as a single varietal wine.
I'm going to just ask a question, first of all, to Rafa Nuria on this wine. There's a question in the Q&A from Janie about temperature of serving the wine. So this wine, Listel, what temperature should it be served at? And is it necessary to decant it? And the same question applies to Bill and Claudia on the Pinot. But you guys first, Rafa and Nuria.
Well, I shall answer that. I would say I would definitely recommend serving it slightly chilled.
Yeah.
Like centigrade between 15 and 16. It's all of our wines, because of the terroir, they're quite high in alcohol. So if you chill them slightly, you avoid any of that alcohol coming through on the nose. It's there, but it definitely doesn't take center stage. The fruit has an opportunity to come through. And in terms of decanting, why not? You can decant it. I think the wine always will express itself better.
Yeah, but it's not necessary.
It's not a requirement, but no. I certainly would, if you have the glassware and the space, why not?
And thank you. Bill and Claudia?
I would probably say exactly the same as what Raphael said. 16 degrees is great, which, depending on what your actual house temperature is,
sometimes we chill our reds when we're in Australia and it's really hot.
When it's hot and you're in a hot environment, then yes, by all means, chuck in the fridge. If it's the middle of the winter and it's from your shed, you don't need to do that.
Yeah.
And just because it's Pinot Noir, you shouldn't, by default, chuck it in the fridge and over chill it, because I think that
you lose a lot if you serve them too cold.
And the acidity.
Same with the Sauvignon.
Yeah, no, I was going to say the same with white wines in general. Too cold, straight from the fridge. You sort of scalp some of the expression, the flavors of the top notes, and I drink most white wines out of from the fridge about 30 minutes in advance just to soften it. But on these reds, I think maybe it's an old view of UK red wine consumption, but it being at room temperature, warming beside the fire, it's sort of perhaps an antiquated view of it. Whereas when I am fortunate enough, I'm in contact with you guys quite a lot, and I know that you guys drink reds chilled, and I think there's still a bit of a gap between that. At the end of the day, you do whatever you like because you're not wrong.
But Ray, what was room temperature 100 years ago?
Yeah,
exactly.
Bloody cold.
Good point, Scott.
Yeah, exactly. Now we're pumping out the energy. Even with the prices going up, we're pumping out the energy. So maybe this is a good excuse to sort of reduce your impact on the environment, your energy bill, and drink smarter. There you go. Thank you, Oscar, for that. Seamless. On that note, I think we deserve to go straight to Tony Port. And actually, there's a lot of questions about the temperature for serving the Tony Port. People asking, did we really need to serve it chilled, have it in the fridge? So maybe you can, just as I'm opening mine, can you carry on the temperature conversation with regards to port, please?
Sure. So maybe I will just explain the difference between the Tony and the Ruby, which will help me explain that we have different temperatures for these two styles of port. So port wine is a fortified wine that results from the addition of wine spirit brandy to stop the fermentation and hold part of the residual sugar that we have from the grapes. So it has some sweetness, about 100 grams per liter, but it's natural sweetness. It's the fructose from the grape juice that was not fully fermented in alcohol, as Claudia, Bill, Nuri, and Raphael did made in the four wines before. They transform all the sugars that they had from the grape must in alcohol. We did not. We interrupt the fermentation halfway through, so the sugars are totally natural, and we increase the alcohol content to around 19%. Then for red ports, which is what we are going to have now, we have two options. First, keep it in stainless steel for a couple of years and then put it in the bottle. And this way we are presenting a port more towards what red wine is. So with a darker ruby color, with more fruit notes, more tannins, a bit more structure on the palate, and aging potential in the bottle. The alternative is to store it in or age it in casks. So in about 500-600 liter barrels, use it, so season, totally neutral in terms of flavor, for several years. And what's going to happen in the barrel, it's a very slow oxidation that is going to change the color from red, which is the original color of all port, all red port is red, towards a brownish, and as the time passes, more orange, and eventually after 56 years, it turns almost like green. And also the aromas are going to move towards, instead of being like that fruit notes, they go more towards almonds or walnuts, more nutty flavors, combined with some caramel notes or with dry fruits, sometimes cigar, sometimes the chocolate. It depends a little bit on the original, on the base port that we put aging in the barrel. So in a ruby style, and I'm combining now a bit of the two ports that we're going to have, but the ruby style, which is the LBV, it's a premium ruby, we have more tannins. While the tawny, because of the long aging in barrel, the tannins are more soft, more gentle. And in the ruby style, I suggest to serve them at a temperature around 16 degrees, pretty much what Raphael and Bill were saying. So we have a lot of tannins here. It's still a relatively young wine, has 5-6 years. So there is no reason to go too cold. Otherwise, the tannins are going to be harsher and it's going to unbalance a little bit. But the tawnies, because of the long aging in barrel, they have a very gentle tannins. And here you can be a bit more aggressive temperature-wise. You can go down to 12, 13 degrees, and you'll get more of these nutty notes coming out. You know, the tannins, as they are very delicate, are not going to bother you on the palate. So in my opinion, you're going to have a much better experience, also because the alcohol is going to be a bit more muted. So I would suggest 12, 13 for the tawnies and about 16 for the late bottle vintage.
Question. What would the tawny taste like at 12 degrees versus, I'm going to say 18. I'm going to go beyond 16 because I want to sort of realistically put it in someone's house in the UK. So 12 from the fridge or 16 from, or 18 from the room. What's the flavor, the characters?
All that nuttiness is going to come through in a very clean, very open way, with the alcohol being almost unnoticeable. Okay. If you go to, as the temperature starts to go up, the alcohol, which is very volatile, you know, it's coming through. And it's going to hide, it's going to mix with that nuttiness, the caramel notes that it has, and you will get less clean and less clear. Also, the nuttiness is going to disappear, and we're going to have a bit more of a caramel or brown sugar notes as the temperatures go past 20 degrees.
Very good. And I think it's what you said earlier, Rafa, about the perception of alcohol being managed when it's slightly chilled. It's still there, folks. You can't get away from it. It will have its effect, but yeah, it's that perception. So maybe, again, back to my daytime drinking question, you know, someone calls over a chilled glass of tawny and they won't even know it. Yeah. Well, it's beautiful. Do you guys drink much fortified wines in New Zealand or Australia, Bill and Claudia?
Occasionally rather than frequently, shall we say. often at Christmas time. I do
I love fortifieds. You
Yeah.
know I love fortifieds.
always do enjoy when we do drink them, but they're more special occasions, like Christmas, I guess.
Yeah, they don't have as many in New Zealand. Like, you don't get as many in, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, but after listening to Oscar, I'm like, we need
port for Christmas.
Yeah, we need port for
Very tasty. And what about
I was-
Rafanuria? Is there an equivalent where you guys are? Do you fortify a wine over in your area?
Yeah.
But maybe in Spain is less common. It is, but less. But the British has a big tradition to fortify from a Porto.
We've made some nice fortified white wines, Garnacha as well. Lower ABV, around 15%, but locked in some of that residual sugar, a late harvest. And we've done some Tintorera, which is, I think it's a Portuguese variety actually. It's Alicante Boucher. So that gives us a lot of flavor and a lot of color as well. So we've done some small scale experiments, but it's always that. It's kind of just an experiment, a bit of fun.
Yeah, but the first one was quite interesting because we had really old vine, but it was late maduration than the other ones. So we decided to make a late harvest and age in a small barrel during 5 years, because at the moment we changed the winery because we were building a new winery and we forgot the barrel. So it was at the end 5 years in a barrel and 2 years more in a bottle. So 7 years of age. Yeah.
Rancio style. Lovely.
Yeah, Rancio style.
Go ahead.
May I? What do you traditionally drink with your ports at Christmas, Oscar? Eat with
Christmas would be like sheep cheese, very intense, very fatty. And also, to me, port is about having it on its own. It's watching a movie, it's reading a book, or just to keep the conversation going with the friends on the table. So I don't really need food to drink my glass of port. But the Tony style, that is, these brownish caramel notes are great with sweeter desserts, Claudia.
And what's the typical dessert in Portugal?
Very typical would be the crème brûlée or la crema catalana, as you guys have in Spain, in Catalonia. We also have a lot of pudding, and another one that is very almost unique from Portugal is sweet rice. Portuguese love rice. We eat rice every day with every other meal. We have a rice with chicken, with meat, with peas, you can have rice with anything. And also for dessert. So you boil rice with milk, add sugar and...
Yeah, arroz con leche, no?
Right, rice pudding.
Yeah, arroz con leche, yeah.
And it's very typical in Spain too, yeah.
It tastes much better when it's not out of a can, like I grew up on. Although I love this ambrosia cream pudding. Now you look and go, was that even safe?
I've never had rice pudding.
You haven't lived.
I haven't lived. Oh.
You haven't lived yet. If you haven't had rice pudding, goodness.
So much to look forward to in this great big world out there, Claudia. God, all this lamb chat. Move on. It's rice pudding.
We can make an interchange. We came to visit you in New Zealand, and you can come to Spain to try the rice pudding.
That sounds
fun.
Ideal. And there are. I should just point out that. Sorry, Claudia.
I like the idea of growing breeds other than Pinot. It'd be fun, Yeah.
People have been asking in the Q&A and in chat whether people do you recruit workers from overseas, i.e. can people in the UK travel and pick grapes, help out in the winery? I think in general, it's semi-romantic, semi-serious. But what about you guys in Spain? Let's start with a visit before picking grapes.
Definitely. I mean, all the angels are welcome to come and visit. Just contact us and we will invite you. We will shout you your visit. But in terms of working, I mean, by all means, come and spend a day picking grapes. It's really hard work. Everything's done by hand. especially bush vines. They're quite low to the ground, so you have to be able to bend over for long periods of time. So if you have a bad back, it's not the hobby that you should get involved in. If you happen to be very short and stocky, I think perhaps you've got a future in grape picking.
But in Spain, we are less tall than in England, so it's good for us.
That works. And Oscar, we had the privilege, Naked Wines had the privilege, was it 2017, when we all decamped down to the Douro and we picked grapes for about 2 hours. Is that all we did? I don't know how long we were out there. But
not even that, right?
Okay, bored now. Okay, let's go for lunch. Yeah, and away we went. But I tell you what, it meant so much to all of us at Naked Wines. People still talk about it. It was incredible. We drank a whole village dry of gin. That street, there was like 3 bars on the streets, and they were like, "No, sorry, your friend was the last one." Yeah, it was good fun. We should move on to with great pleasure, the grand finale, your LBV port. So I'm going to open it, and Oscar, you've already introduced the difference between, but if you've got a glass, perhaps you can sort of describe what people should be tasting. So anyone you can now move on to wine 6 if you haven't already smashed them all about 20 minutes ago.
Yep.
About it.
Yeah, so the late bottle vintage is a fruity port with a dark red color, in which we want to smell, we want to notice the dark red flavors of that the grape brings to the port, being those like strawberries, dark cherries, plums, maybe figs. And then on the palate, we want it to be, rich, lush, intense, but at the same time, once we swallow it, to be gentle and those tannins to be relatively managed. And it's a port that, probably it's not the case. You are going to drink it through Christmas, but it ages well in the bottle for the next decade, easily. It's going to preserve those fruit notes. It's going to get more gentle, even more gentle, lose a bit of that body, that nervous that it still has, but it ages very well. Port is actually one of the wines that ages the best in the world, as the combination of sugar and alcohol really help in the preservation of it. And this is a port that I think it's great with the blue cheeses. To me, the LBV, it's a lot about blue cheeses, more intense, more powerful cheeses. And if you like chocolate, like a 70 or 80% dark chocolate, go for an LBV. It also, chocolate's actually very, very hard to pair with because of the high level of tannins that chocolate cacao also has. And it combines very well with a late bottle vintage. So before you go to bed, once you finish this conversation, get that little bar of dark chocolate and try with the LBV. Just save a little sip.
You'll be wired. You won't be able to sleep. But I agree. It is it's the alcohol in it and the structure in this LBV port, late bottle vintage port, that does marry well with 70% or 85% chocolate. That positive bitterness that marries well, and it just goes straight in there because you have the depth, the real depth of flavor. I think it was an angel called Stephen, if I caught it right, who said his mouth just exploded off his face when he tasted this wine. So I think it's one of the best tasting notes I've seen in the general massive appreciation for this wine. But I have to say, Oscar, and you and everyone, all of you guys, you make fantastic wines. But in my experience of tasting fortified wines or port wines, you make very, very good and very good value for money port wines. And I mean, it's testament to how long we work together, but yourself and Claudia and the team. And when I saw the setup there, when all of Naked Wines went there and you took us through the different barrel rooms and big barrels and old barrels, just the quality control, but you deliver every single year such a high level of quality. So we are lucky to have you, but Angels at this price, it's really wonderful stuff. Yeah.
Thank you, Ray. You made my day. I can go to sleep now.
With some dark chocolate. Rafa, if I may, my producer is reminding me that there were some props that might sort of pop up here and there, but we may not have had the opportunity. Do you have anything you'd like to share with us?
Well, we're past the 9 o'clock watershed. So no, it's just some idiosyncratic cultural practices in Catalonia over this festive time. They seem to be really obsessed with defecation.
Be careful.
we could start with this thing.
Is a mini version of the Theo. It's called Theo.
The uncle.
Is a lock, and arrive at the houses a week before Christmas or so. The kids waiting for him, excited, and the tradition.
So they don't use Christmas trees as we would to put, to stow hide presents. They have a log.
Yeah, we have trees, but the more traditional is the log. And then we always cover with a blanket.
Yeah.
And we have a stick and quick the log with a stick.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, singing a traditional song.
Do you want to sing the song?
Yeah, would you sing the song first, please? That'd be great. I have no idea what it sounds like.
Just forget there are 1,000 people listening somewhere.
It's like something like Cagatío de avellanas y turro.
So that means defecate uncle log, almond cakes and
Avellanas y turro.
almond cakes and dried fruits.
No cagues arengadas que son más asaladas.
Don't shit out sardines,
Which are too salty.
which are too salty.
Cagaturrons que son més bons.
Give us the almond cakes which are
Better.
better.
And then the kids open the blanket and find the presents under the lock.
Yes, so there you go.
Thank you. That is brilliant. Thank you so much. Wow. Wow. And in Spanish, the name Tío, what's it called?
That means like uncle or a colloquial term for like a friend or something like that. You say tío.
And what's the other word for the log? Sorry. So what you call it?
Caga, which means
Well, they don't actually call it a log. It just is a log.
is a lock.
You
They
don't
just call
need
it
to-
Tío.
You just call it an uncle. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Well, I was not expecting that on tonight's tasting with our winemakers from around the world, but it was fantastic. It was a highlight. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. Have you any more prompts?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
actually we do.
Oh God.
Shindavara.
Where is the caga name? Okay.
So this is a typical Catalan nativity scene.
Yeah, we use the nativity. That's very typical, and it's little figures with the
There's the baby Jesus,
baby Jesus, Joseph, Maria,
the woodsman.
yeah,
Yeah.
the chicken.
Yeah.
This is the woman in the river making the clothes.
Very good.
Camel.
And then somewhere lurking in this traditional family Catalan nativity scene, we have some cheeky characters.
All right.
I'll just show them there.
Oh dear. Look away now if you're offended by
Yeah.
mooning.
So,
Oh dear. Yeah.
So these are called the caganes,
Yeah.
who are the defecators.
You're big into that whole spiel in
Yeah, for some reason. I mean, I'm not Catalan, so Lydia, maybe she can explain this obsession with poo.
Yeah, no.
I think it's a link
We are who we are.
to the earth. They're linked to the earth. But normally you would go to the Christmas market and you would have the current prime minister or some of the footballers all reproduced as in this position.
And you
I
can
see.
find right now. You can find Boris Johnson or.
Yeah. So,
we need to move on.
just an insight into local traditions.
So the kings arriving, and
There we
every
go.
day you advance one step till the day of the nativity, that
Yes.
they are in front of the little Jesus.
Yeah. Very good. And then they get there on the 24th, and it's do they?
No, this is the 6th.
Oh, the 6th, I beg your pardon. I forgot it all, to be honest. I sort of brainwashed myself. I'll remember again next year. Once a year, I forget and I remember. So they arrive on the 6th, and then it all kicks off.
Yeah,
then,
because actually Santa Claus is a traditional that we take from the States or from England, but it's not traditional from Spain. We have the three kings, the Epiphany.
Very good.
Epiphany, yeah.
Very good. And anything else you'd like to share with our viewers related to defecating?
No.
I think that's a wrap for us. Yeah.
Lots. Very good. Well, I love it. What we'll just quickly do is I'm going to try and catch some of the questions in the Q&A. We had touched on some of them. People were asking the glasses I'm using, and this is not in any way promoted because we don't sell them, I'm afraid. I just had one. This is a Riedel glass. The range is called Wings, and then there are others. What are you drinking from there, Rafa, with your glass?
Yeah, these, I think they're called Josephine glasses. They're amazing. We were given them by a friend of ours who works in the wine trade, and they're beautiful, really nice.
They look quite nice. And Oscar, what have you got?
I'm using a port glass, so relatively tight top, so the alcohol doesn't come through so easily, and also smaller in size, so you don't get drunk so quick.
Pacing it. And Bill and Claudia, you're drinking coffee cups. I think Bill has. Well, you've evolved it.
This is my favorite coffee cup, which is like covered in like lizards and insects and things. We used to have 4. I'm down to 1. We've broken that many.
Big mornings.
My wine glass. If anyone else like to see those too.
Yeah.
I think there's Spiegelau's, and I think it's called Style is the. But they have that's a really good one for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and that's a good one for Sauvignon. The Pinot ones are just a bit bigger and a bit rounder, which is great for getting those aromatics up and going.
And then the Sauvignon.
And they're okay dishwasher.
And they work in dishwasher good too.
Oh, wow, a rare feat. Okay, let me see. I'm going to just see if I can pull out any more questions. We touched on the refrigeration of the ports, and let me see, from vegan and vegetarian point, I would like to know what substance you are using to clear your wine. So Rafa, back to your point about your wine being vegan, how do you clarify your wine to make it to qualify as a vegan wine or vegetarian?
So there'd be vegetable-based fining agents. So in the past, well, other people still use them. Obviously, it's fine. It's perfectly correct and legal to use animal-derived fining agents like egg whites or fish tail products. But we use basically potato-based fining agents or pea-based, as in the peas, rather than back on that other theme which we just left behind. So yeah, vegetable-based fining agents.
Very good. Thank you. And now I'm going to rattle through questions just so we get to as many as possible. Oscar, how long would the port last once the bottle is opened? Not talking about the tasting packs, but if you were to have a full bottle. So if you opened it, let's say today, how many days, weeks could you keep either the Tawny or the LBV?
LBV, I would say between a month and 2. It's fresher. Yeah, the flavors are going to disappear quicker. The Tawnies, they can handle up to 6 months. It aged already for 5 years in oak, so it got a lot of oxygen during these 5 years. So it's not because you open the bottle that's going to change a lot. It's actually changed very little. So up to 6 months, you're nice. You're good.
Great, thanks. And that was from James and separately asked by Richard Lodge. And there was a question from John and Nicola Skidmore. Hiya, John. Why is the Tawny port such a dark red? And I did observe that myself. It wasn't the tawniest of tawny looking Tawny ports that I had seen. It tastes and smells like it, but it didn't in appearance. Is that simply its time, like where it is in its life?
It's location. It's if you go back to the beginning of our conversation and talking about the lower rainfall, less production, more concentrated grapes, more color. So in our area, where we are in the beginning of the Upper Douro, we have less and less rain that the other regions that are in the western part have. So they may be able to produce double the kilograms per hectare. They have a much higher yield with the less concentrated grapes, so less flavor, less color. so the tawnies age faster. In our case, as we have less production, we have more color for longer.
Okay, so it's house specific. It's what you produce yourself. Very good. Okay, and are the wine pouches recyclable? Good question to ask. The inner, the pouch itself inside is not. Alas, I'm sorry. The cardboard on the outside is obviously. And what we wanted to do was to share as much wine and styles with as many people as possible. So we're very aware of the carbon footprint, although I think it is minimal. Alas, it's not currently recyclable, but it's 2021, nearly 2022, and innovation is always progressing. And so that's what we are constantly looking at, is how we can maintain the quality of preservation of the wine, so no oxygen gets in, when we can find a pouch that we could recycle. I'm going to take 2 more questions, and then I think we will wrap it up. Let the guys. Oh, Claudia's got a question. Claudia,
I've got a question for Oscar. So traditional Christmas pudding, like boiled fruit pudding. What port would be nice with it? Which would you have? Would you have it?
I would go for a tawny.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you think that would be a good thing?
Say it again.
That would be a nice match.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah, I think that the sweeter the dessert, the food is, the better it goes with the tawny style. The less sweet, more on the the bitterness of the chocolate, or the cheese is better with the ruby style, more fruitier, more tannins. Yeah, no. It's a great match. The pudding with the tawny port is a great match. No question.
Bill makes a great Christmas pudding, so it's a very large Christmas pudding.
Is it?
Yeah.
Takes 2 bowls.
and Oscar, just a good question. So for anyone who has bought the Christmas case where your ruby port was included, just to carry on the narrative, how does that ruby port compare to the tawny we've just had and the LBV we've just had? The ruby, which is incredible quality as well.
This is ruby. It's it's a little bit younger than the late bottle vintage. The late bottle vintage, we aged it for 12 months in a very big oak bins to soften the tannins, while the reserve ruby has been in stainless steel only. So I would say that the reserve ruby has a bit more of a fruitier character, while the LBV, because of the aging in oak, also gets more gentle and a bit more complex.
Very good. Okay, thank you for that. Anya McGuinness asks, is that a blue Leinster Santi hat? It's Leinster, it's the rugby team, and it's not. I do have a Leinster flag over there, but I won't pull it out onto. Yeah, consider it Leinster blue. And so anyway, I think it has been an incredible evening of what I really enjoyed is just learning also between the props, the coffee chat, the port chat, everything, the food, mostly the food was fantastic. But I'm very, very grateful to you guys for giving us your time and sharing it with all the angels. And the response in the chat has been enormous, massive appreciation. So thank you to you guys for joining, and thank you for everyone who's tuned in. And I hope you can take away some benefits. I'm now going to be chilling my ports a little bit, chilling most things down a little bit. So thank you. I'll leave you each, Bill and Claudia, if you want to say goodbye to everyone.
It was lovely seeing everyone.
Thank you, everybody, for joining in. Hope you all have a fabulous Christmas.
Right, and Rafa and Nuria.
Thank you very much for inviting us. It's been a pleasure and nice to share with you both. And hope you have a really nice Christmas this year.
Yeah, thanks, Ray, Oscar, Bill, Claudia. Lovely to meet you all as well. So cheers, angels. Happy Christmas.
Lovely, lovely. And Oscar, my main man.
Merry Christmas to you all, winemakers, Ray, and our lovely angels. I look forward to see you very soon. Very, very soon.
Cheers, everybody. Thank you for participating. See you in the new year for more fun and games. Cheers.